The first thing David Cole noticed was the smell. It drifted through the pine trees at the edge of Cedar Ridge Sweet. Sharp, unmistakable. Corn, mash, and smoke. Moonshine. David slowed his horse and rested a hand near his revolver, scanning the rocky hollow below. He'd been a lawman long enough to know most stills were guarded by desperate men or reckless fools. Either way, they usually ended with iron bracelets and a long ride to town. The hollow was quiet. A thin column of smoke rose from behind a stand of rocks near the creek. David dismounted and tied his horse, moving carefully on foot. The creek masked his steps as he approached, every instinct alert. When he parted the brush, he expected trouble. What he found instead made him stop cold. A woman stood beside the still, sleeves rolled to her elbows, copper coils gleaming in the morning light. She stirred a mash barrel with steady hands, her dark hair braided down her back. She moved with purpose, not fear, like someone who had done this many times before. She was younger than he expected. Strong, too, not hardened, but not soft. A twig snapped beneath David's boot. The woman whirled, gripping a long iron poker like a weapon. Her eyes, clear, sharp, defiant, locked onto him. When she saw the badge on his chest, her face paled for half a second, before settling into something firmer. "So," she said, "you finally came." David straightened slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Sarah Bennett." Her jaw tightened. "That depends who's asking." David Cole. "Territorial law." He nodded toward the still. "You know why I'm here." She laughed once, humorless. "I figured the smoke would give me away sooner or later." David studied the setup. It was small, careful, efficient. Not the kind of operation run for greed. His eyes drifted past her to the edge of the clearing, where a worn cabin leaned against the trees. He heard a cough. A child's cough. Sarah followed his gaze and stepped deliberately between him and the cabin. "You don't need to look in there." "That your family?" he asked. "My siblings," she said evenly. "All I've got?" David hesitated. He'd arrested moonshiners before. They usually ran or reached for guns. Sarah did neither. She stood her ground, shoulders squared, daring him to do his duty. "Many?" he asked. "3, she replied. 2 boys and a girl. Youngest is 6. David exhaled slowly. "You know distilling's illegal." "I know," she said. "I also know starving is worse." Silence settled between them, broken only by the creek and the soft bubble of the still. David's gaze flicked back to her hand scarred, steady, capable. "You selling in town?" he asked. She shook her head. "I trade medicine, flour, blankets, when winter hits." Her voice cracked just slightly. "I don't drink it myself." That surprised him. He stepped closer, close enough to see the fatigue in her eyes. "Your parents?" "Gone," she said. "Fever took them last spring." David looked away. The law was clear. The badge on his chest weighed heavier than it had in a long time. He reached into his coat, and Sarah's grip tightened on the poker. Instead of cuffs, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, warning citation, unsigned. "I should shut this down," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "Then do it." David tore the paper in half. "Move the still deeper into the woods," he said. "Less smoke. I won't be able to ignore it twice." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "Why?" David mounted his horse, the decision already settling into his bones. "Because mercy's still part of justice," he said. "And because some laws don't see what I just did." As he rode away, the smell of moonshine followed him, but so did the image of Sarah Bennett, standing alone in the pines, fighting for more than survival. David didn't sleep that night. The image of Sarah Bennett lingered behind his eyes, the way she stood between him and the cabin, like a wall built of bone and will. He'd ridden back to Cedar Ridge with the lawman's familiar ache in his chest, the one that came from choosing between what was written and what was right. By dawn, he was back on patrol, though his horse seemed to know exactly where it was headed. The woods greeted him with morning fog and birdsong. The still was gone. David felt a flicker of relief and something close to pride. She'd listened. He dismounted near the creek, following faint tracks deeper into the pines. He didn't tell himself why. He wasn't there to arrest anyone. He was just checking. He found the new site, well hidden in a narrow ravine. Smoke dispersed beneath heavy branches. Sarah noticed him immediately. "Either you're bad at staying away," she called out, "or I didn't hide it well enough." David stepped into the clearing, hands raised again. "You did fine. I'm not here about that." She studied him cautiously, then gestured toward a stump. "Then you'd better say why you are." He sat, removing his hat. Up close, she looked more tired than he remembered. A bruise darkened one forearm. Her knuckles were raw. "Towns. Talking," he said. "Someone's been asking questions about moonshine on the North Ridge." Her shoulders stiffened. "Who? Doesn't matter. Matters that they weren't asking me." Sarah exhaled sharply and turned back to the still. "So your mercy has a limit." "No," David said. "My warning does." She faced him again, eyes flashing. "Then arrest me now and be done with it." "I won't," he said simply. "But someone else might." Silence stretched. From the cabin farther up, the ravine came laughter-thin, bright, a child's voice. Sarah's expression softened, despite herself. "That's Lily. She laughs like that when she's feeling better." "You said she was sick," David said. "She was." Sarah hesitated, then spoke quietly. "The shine paid for medicine." David swallowed. He'd enforced the law long enough to know it rarely reached places like this where survival lived on the edge of legality. "You need another way," he said. Sarah laughed bitterly. "You offering me one? I might be able to help," he said. "There's a rancher south of town, Elliott Ward. Needs hands. Honest work." She shook her head. "I can't leave them, and I can't earn enough fast enough." David looked at the still, the barrels, the careful system she'd built. "Then you need protection." Her eyes narrowed. "From you." "From others," he corrected. "If I'm the one who knows where you are, I can steer trouble away." Sarah stared at him, searching his face for deception. "Why would you do that?" David didn't answer right away. He watched Lily dart past the trees, chasing one of the boys, her laughter echoing through the ravine. "Because my father was a lawman," he said at last. "And he taught me that the badge isn't meant to crush people, it's meant to shield them." Sarah's grip tightened on the ladle. "And what happens when shielding me costs you?" David met her gaze. "Then I'll answer for it." Something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. Days passed, and David returned more often than he should have. Sometimes with warnings. Sometimes with supplies quietly left near the creek. Sarah never thanked him outright, but she looked at him differently now. Less like an enemy. More like a man standing on a dangerous line. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the still cooled, Sarah handed him a tin cup. "Don't," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "It's not the shine. It's tea." He accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact lingered longer than either expected. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "The badge." David thought of the dust-covered streets, the cells, the judgments. Then he thought of this ravine. "Sometimes," he said. "But not today." Sarah looked away, a faint smile touching her lips. And for the first time since he'd met her, David realized the line he was walking wasn't just legal, it was personal. By autumn, the woods had learned their rhythm. David came at irregular hours, never twice the same day, always careful to leave no trail. Sarah learned to read his silences as well as his words. When he said little, it meant trouble was close. When he lingered, it meant the world beyond the pines had loosened its grip, if only for a while. One afternoon, he arrived with his jaw tight and his hat pulled low. "They're forming a posse," he said, without preamble. Sarah froze, hands submerged in cool creek water. "For me?" "For the still," he replied. "A shipment in town went bad. Folks are angry." Her chest tightened. "I don't sell in town." "I know," David said. "But anger doesn't need truth to move." Sarah stood slowly, wiping her hands on her skirt. "Then this is where it ends." David shook his head. "Not yet." He followed her to the cabin, where the children sat around a rough table. The boys paused mid-argument. Lily looked up and smiled when she saw David. "Is he staying for supper?" she asked. Sarah hesitated. "If that's all right," David said gently. That night, the cabin felt smaller, warmer. David helped patch a loose board and listened as the boys told him about trapping rabbits and the time Sarah scared off a mountain lion with a shovel. "She didn't even scream," one boy said proudly. David glanced at Sarah. "Sounds about right." After the children slept, Sarah and David sat on the cabin steps. The sky wide and crowded with stars. "They won't stop," Sarah said quietly. "You know that." David nodded. "Which is why we need to end this on our terms." She turned to him sharply. "I won't run." "I'm not asking you to," he said. "I'm asking you to trust me." She searched his face, the flickering lantern light revealing lines of strain he hadn't had before. "What are you risking?" she asked. "Everything," he said honestly. They fell silent. The distance between them felt charged, alive. "If you help me," she said slowly, "and they catch you, I'll answer for it," he said again. "But I won't let them take your family." Her voice trembled despite her effort. "Why does that matter to you so much?" David hesitated. Then he said it. "Because somewhere along the way, you started to matter to me." Sarah's breath caught. She stood abruptly, pacing the small porch. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you'd burn this place down before letting harm come to them." She stopped and faced him. "And you'd break the law to stop it." "Yes." The truth settled between them, like a vow neither had spoken aloud. The plan was simple and dangerous. David would announce a raid at the old North Ridge, drawing the posse away. Sarah would dismantle the still completely and move the family south by dawn. "What then?" she asked. David looked toward the horizon. "Then, I resign." Her eyes widened. "You'd give up the badge." "It's already slipping," he said. "Might as well let it fall with purpose." The night before the move, Sarah worked without rest. David helped carry copper coils, his hands burning as he bent the metal beyond use. At one point, Sarah stopped him. "You don't have to destroy it all." "Yes, I do," he said. "If there's no still, there's no crime." Their hands brushed again, lingering longer this time. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Before dawn, they shared a quiet moment by the creek. Sarah's voice was soft. "If you hadn't found me that day," David met her gaze, "I'd still be a lawman who thought rules were enough." She stepped closer. For a heartbeat, he thought she might kiss him, but she stopped just short. "Be careful today," she said. "You too," he replied. When David rode out to meet the posse, dust rising behind him, he carried more than a lie. He carried hope into the weight of loving someone the law had never been written to protect. The posse, gathered by late afternoon, restless and loud, beneath a sky streaked with copper and gold. Horses stamped, rifles were checked and rechecked. Anger hummed through the group like a live wire. David stood at the center of it all, badge glinting, expression unreadable. "We move at sundown," he said. "North Ridge. Reports say the still's active again." A few men spat into the dirt. Others nodded grimly. None questioned him. He was the law, and until this moment, he always had been. As they rode out, David felt every hoofbeat like a countdown. At the North Ridge, they found exactly what David intended them to find: old tracks. Cold ash, the ghost of a fire long dead. The men spread out, cursing as daylight faded. "This is a waste of time," someone muttered. David dismounted, feigning inspection. "Whoever ran it's gone," he said. "Could be days." Suspicion crept into the air. "You sure about that, Cole?" a man named Harlan asked, eyes narrowing. "Feels like we're being led." David met his gaze steadily. "You calling me a liar?" Silence. Then Harlan looked away. But doubt, once planted, grew fast. By the time the posse disbanded, muttering and frustrated, the sun had slipped below the hills. David mounted his horse and rode hard not back to town, but south, toward the ravine. He arrived to find emptiness. The cabin stood bare. No barrels, no still. No children's laughter. Only trax wagon wheels, heading south. Relief hit him so hard, He had to grip the saddle horn. Then he heard it. A voice behind him. "Evenin', David." He turned slowly. Harlan stood in the trees, rifle resting easy in his hands. 2 other men flanked him. "Thought I'd check where you really spend your time," Harlan said. His gaze swept the clearing. "Looks like I was right." David didn't reach for his gun. "They're gone." "Figured," Harlan said. "Woman with kids. Took advantage of a soft-hearted lawman." David's jaw tightened. "You're wrong." Am I?" Harlan stepped closer. "Funny thing is, Coldis don't have to end bad. You tell us where she went, we say you tried your best." David shook his head once. "I won't." Harlan sighed. "That's a shame." The rifle lifted. Before the tension could snap, a new sound cut through the tree's hooves. Fast. A wagon burst into the clearing. Sarah at the reins, eyes wild with fear. The children huddled beneath blankets. David's heart dropped. She reined in hard. "They followed us," she said breathlessly. "I had nowhere else to go." Harlan smiled thinly. "Well, that saves time." David stepped in front of the wagon, arms outstretched. "You want her, you go through me." Sarah's voice broke. "David, don't." He didn't look back. "I gave up the badge today." Harlan laughed. "You think that matters?" David reached up slowly and unpinned the badge from his coat, letting it fall into the dirt. "It does to me," he said. For a long moment, no one moved. The sky darkened. Crickets began to sing. Then, Lily's small voice cut through the silence. "Please, don't hurt him." Harlan hesitated. Just a fraction. It was enough. The other men shifted uncomfortably. One lowered his rifle. Another cleared his throat. "This ain't what we signed up for," someone muttered. Harlan cursed under his breath. "Fine," he snapped. "Get them out of here before I change my mind." David didn't wait. He climbed onto the wagon beside Sarah, grabbed the reins, and drove south through the trees, the ravine swallowing them whole. They didn't stop until the stars were high and the land opened wide before them. Sarah turned to him, tears streaking her face. "You gave up everything." David took her hand, steady and sure. "No," he said. "I chose it." But in the quiet beyond the reach of the law, Sarah leaned into him, finally allowing herself to believe that mercy once given could change the course of a life. The land south of Cedar Ridge was quieter, broader, as if the world itself had loosened its grip. Rolling grass replaced tight ravines, and the air smelled of open sky instead of smoke and secrecy. They built their new life slowly. The wagon became a home at first, then a cabin with a real roof and windows that let the light in. David worked as a ranch hand for Elliott Ward, his hands learning a different kind of labor, one without a badge, without authority. It felt strange, being just a man again. But it also felt honest. Sarah found her footing faster than she expected. She traded skills instead of shine mending, cooking, growing what the land would allow. The children flourished. The boys ran wild and loud. Lily's cough faded until it was nothing more than a memory. At night, when the work was done and the stars stretched endlessly above them, David and Sarah sat side by side on the porch. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked one evening. "The law." David thought for a moment. "I miss believing I could fix things with rules," he said. "But I don't miss pretending they're enough." She smiled softly. Their love came quietly. No grand declarations, just shared mornings, calloused hands brushing, trust built one day at a time. When David reached for Sarah, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like mercy finally finding a place to rest. One spring morning, David knelt in the grass outside the cabin, holding a simple ring he'd traded a month's wages for. "I can't promise an easy life," he said. Sarah laughed through tears. "You already didn't." She said yes, before he finished the question. The past didn't vanish. Word traveled slowly, but it traveled. Once, a rider passed through who recognized David. "Sheriff's still looking for you," the man said casually. David nodded. "I figured." The rider left. The law never followed. Some lines, once crossed for the right reasons, were never meant to be retraced. Years later, Sarah would tell their story differently. She'd say, "Mercy saved them." David would say, "Love did." The truth lived somewhere between the two. On quiet evenings, David would watch Sarah laugh, with their children, neoned. Think about the moment he tore that warning in half. It had been the first choice of the rest of his life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.